Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm talking about the 2026 Michigan governor's race and a new poll that was released just a few days ago that talks about the governor's race and showing where things stand at this time. So in this poll, before just quickly showing the numbers here, the Democrat Jocelyn Benson and the Republican John James emerged the early favorites in the race for Michigan's governor. Now looking at the actual election itself, we know that for November 3rd, 2026, there will be a governor election for the state of Michigan, as Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer is term limited and cannot seek a third term. We also have a very interesting situation happening in this race where Mike Duggan, who is an American lawyer, businessman, and politician serving as the mayor of Detroit since 2014, is officially running for governor as an independent. And as this poll and some other polls have shown so far, Duggan is taking up a very large percentage of the vote, more so than we've seen for a third-party candidate in a very long time in a lot of U.S. elections. The actual numbers of the poll itself show that from the Chicago-based Glengarriff Group, some early insights into the leaders in these polls, with roughly 600 registered voters being part of the sample for this poll. On the governor's side of things, with a heavy disclaimer that the survey's population consists of general election voters, not primary election voters, with crucial differences between the two groups of voters, the poll asked about the preferred candidate from each party in the race. Among Democratic voters, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was the favorite for governor with 59.3% support among registered Democratic voters and 65% support from definitive voters. U.S. Representative Haley Stevens, a Democrat from Birmingham, was the preferred nominee for U.S. Senate with support of 34% of registered Democratic voters. U.S. Representative John James, the Republican of Shelby, Twin Peaks area, was Republicans' preferred candidate for governor, although he gathered just 42% from registered voters and 44% among Republicans who said they'd definitely vote in 2026. On the Senate side of things, former U.S. Representative Mike Rogers was the preferred Senate nominee with 61% support from registered Republicans and 64% for definitive voters. When polling on candidates for governor, Republican Tudor Dixon, who unsuccessfully ran against Gretchen Whitmer in 2022, carried the highest name recognition among voters at 70%. While Dixon has not announced another campaign for governor, she previously released a statement to social media where she said she was considering the possibility alongside a potential Senate campaign. Benson, who announced her campaign in January, carried recognition with 66% of voters polled, while James was recognized by 65% of voters. James announced his campaign last month. So currently, the two declared candidates, John James and Jocelyn Benson, both lead their respective parties in terms of candidates actually in the race. Breaking down the 70% of voters who recognized Dixon, 18% of voters polled her held favorable views towards her, while 24% had an unfavorable view, and 28% said they had no opinion. Benson, on the other hand, polled favorably with 28% of voters and unfavorably with 16%, while 23% had no opinions. James gathered favorable responses from 26%, 19% unfavorable, and 20% had no opinion. Among Democrats specifically, Benson carried the highest name ID when compared to Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who was also in this race, and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson, with 74% name recognition. Gilchrist, who announced his candidacy in March, got 51%, and 28% ID'd Swanson. While Dixon has the largest name ID among Republicans at 76%, James wasn't too far behind either at 74%. James also held a larger share of favorable recognition at 50%, while 34% held a favorable view of Dixon among Republican voters. Former Attorney General of Michigan Mike Cox, who launched his campaign in April, was recognized by 58% of voters, while 29% identified Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt, the Republican of Porter Township, who was among the first to announce back in January. The poll also looked at Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, a longtime Democrat who opted to instead run for governor as an independent. According to the breakdown of the results, Duggan's polling numbers were deeply unusual for two reasons. First, that Duggan's name recognition was deeply split between Metro Detroit and outstate Michigan, with 86% of residents in the metro area recognizing him, while only 31% of out-of-state residents ever heard of him. Second, Duggan was the only candidate in the survey to receive a favorable rating from voters of all political persuasions, with 30% of strong Democrats identifying Duggan favorably compared to 7% who viewed him unfavorably. 28% view Duggan favorably, while 8% view him unfavorably. 24% of Republicans recognized Duggan favorably, while 4% or unfavorable. Now, the poll does also show several matchups of the governor candidates, but instead of just reading it off the article, I do have the graphics here to show you from Wikipedia as well. In this poll, which was the Glengarriff poll, which was commissioned during early May, it showed Benson leading over John James by 1 point, Mike Duggan 35 to 34, Mike Duggan the independent getting 22%, 9% saying they are undecided. So Duggan starts out with a very large share of the vote for an independent candidate. That could certainly play a very big factor in this upcoming race. This poll down here was among definite voters, showed that Benson has 38%, James 33%, and Duggan 21%. As for the Jocelyn Benson versus Mike Cox, Mike Duggan argument, it was 35-27 for Benson over Cox, 25 for Duggan, 13% undecided. In this one, her lead's even larger, with 39-26 to 25. So Jocelyn Benson versus John James appears to be the closest matchup for James against Benson, whereas Jocelyn Benson versus Eric Nesbitt shows Benson leading Nesbitt by 10% and definite voters leading by 14%. When it's Chris Swanson versus John James, who's more well known, he still has around that mid 35% mark, but Swanson's only down at 30%. So James, his approval doesn't really, or his vote numbers don't change too much. Only the Democratic candidates really do. For Garland Gilchrist, it's something similar. Gilchrist starts out among all voters, 35-29 advantage James. Definite voters, 34-33 advantage James. So right now it seems Jocelyn Benson is the strongest performing Democrat in these governor's race in the general election. John James appears to be the strongest performing Republican at this time. Mike Duggan, the independent, is taking a large percentage of votes away, which could be a very big factor for November. So all the political website predictions, Cook Politico, Inside Elections, Tableau Crystal Ball, have this race listed as a toss-up, and for good reason. In 2024, we saw the state of Michigan vote for Donald Trump for president by just 1.4%, a very, very close race. In 2020, it voted for Joe Biden by 2.8%, and Donald Trump for 2016 by 0.22%. So the last three presidential elections, Michigan has been insanely close. The Senate race in 2024 could literally not get any more close than it was. The Democrat Lisa Slotkin won against Mike Rogers by just 0.34%. Very close race. 2020, Gary Peters defeated John James, who is running for governor, obviously, by just 1.7%. Again, very, very close. The governor's side of things, however, Gretchen Whitmer has had an easier time at winning election and re-election. She won re-election in 2022 against Tudor Dixon by 10.5%, a likely Democratic win. In 2018, she won election after the Republican governor at the time, I believe his name was Rick Snyder, was facing scandal over the situation happening in Flint, Michigan. Whitmer and the Democrats had a lot of momentum in that election. Whitmer was able to win by 9.6%. I would bet pretty much everything that 2026 will not be as favorable for the Democrats in the governor's race as 2018 and 2022 were, as Gretchen Whitmer held very high approval ratings and won re-election relatively handily. I think this will be a lot closer. The question will be, with Mike Duggan being the independent candidate in the race, taking a large percentage of votes away from Democrats and Republicans, and independents going with him as well, what does that do for the race? Right now, my prediction to start this race out, I currently have the Democrat being Jocelyn Benson, the Republican being John James, and Mike Duggan on the ballot. And I currently have the race starting out as lean Democrat for Jocelyn Benson. I think she wins by around 2.5% to 3%. And I think a large reason why is vote splitting between the Democrat, Republican, and Independent with Mike Duggan is going to keep this race very, very close. The most recent example I can think of a governor's race that had a lot of vote splitting was the state of Oregon, where Tina Kotek, the Democrat, got about 47%, the Republican Drazen got 43.5%, and a third-party candidate got about 8.62%. And that was a very close race in a Democratic state. This time around, though, Michigan is much more of a battleground state than Oregon is, so there is the potential for John James, the Republican, to win this race due to vote splitting. The only thing so far is that the early vote, or the early polls in this race seem to suggest Mike Duggan getting around 20% of the vote, while only 9% is left undecided. If Mike Duggan's getting 22% of the vote, that's not him just getting Republicans or Democrats or Independents, that's getting a healthy mix of all three, which to me says that remaining 9% is likely going to decide who ends up winning this race. And right now, I think Jocelyn Benson has just a very narrow edge in the state, given the fact that 2026 should be a midterm environment that is more favorable for the Democrats, and usually is a repudiation of the incumbent White House and the incumbent administration, which would give the Democrats the benefit. It is also worth noting in the few examples when Michigan has had elections where Donald Trump has not been at the top of the ticket, like 2022, Democrats like Gretchen Whitmer did do very well in 2022. 2018, Whitmer and Democrats did very well in 2018 as well. Whitmer won by 9.6%. On the Senate level, Democrat Debbie Stabenow defeated John James by 6.5%. So Democrats have won likely Democratic races in the midterm elections when Donald Trump was not at the top of the ticket. Given that Michigan has trended more to the Republican direction, though, I do think it'll be under 5 points. But without Trump at the top of the ticket, I do think Jocelyn Benson will win this Michigan governor's race by a lean Democratic margin. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this race. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.